What's going on, guys? It's the Draft Nerd, and today we're going to be doing a 2025 NFL mock draft. Now that we're about 2 weeks into the season, we can kind of see what teams are maybe needing and what positions teams are, pretty set on. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, coming in at number 1, we got the Carolina Panthers, and this draft order is just what I got from PFF. I did not make this draft order, so don't get mad at me, because I can see there's some teams that might not be picking this early, like maybe the Saints. But this is just what PFF gave me, and that's what I'm going with. So don't get mad at me in the comments. But here at number 1, the Carolina Panthers are looking like they're in need of a quarterback now with the benching of Bryce Young. I think he's played his last snap in Carolina. Andy Dalton isn't the long-term answer, obviously. But do you really want to go quarterback with this first overall pick? It's not a very strong quarterback class, as we can see. Guys like Carson Beck, who didn't have a great week. Shedeur Sanders has struggled at times. Connor Wigman has been very bad so far. Quinn Ewers has played good, but are you going to take him with the first overall pick? Probably not. I don't think any of these quarterbacks are worth the first overall pick. And even if there was one, I think if you're the Panthers, you just get best player available. And we're not doing trades in this mock draft, but if we were, maybe trade out of this if there's a team wanting to trade up for a quarterback and just gain talent, get best player available, build that team around a potential quarterback, and then hopefully get a guy like Arch Manning in next year's draft. So that's kind of what we're going to do here, and we're just going to take best player available just because there's no trades, or else I'd probably look to trade back. But looking at Mason Graham here, Will Johnson is my number 1 overall player, but Mason Graham I think might fit a little bit better. That Carolina Panthers defensive line has no real pass rush upside. Even with a healthy Derrick Brown, he's not gonna provide much pass rush. He's more of a run stop. He's more of a run stopper. But pairing him up with Mason Graham, having that run stuffer plus that guy who can shut off blocks and rush the passer, I think that's a very good duo there. Moving on to number 2, we got the New England Patriots, and it would be really nice to add to that defense with a guy like Will Johnson. But I think we got to focus on the offense here and get either a solid offensive lineman or a weapon for Drake May to throw to, because right now that Patriots wide receiver core is not very good, but it's also very young. I think I'm leaning more towards getting offensive line help, because Micah Wainu, he's playing right tackle now, but he looks like a guard trying to play tackle. He's a very good guard. I just think he's playing out of position right now. And getting Will Campbell, and even if we got to push him to the right side of the offensive line at right tackle, I still think he's able to do that. Or he could even push into guard, worst case scenario, just because he does seem to have a little bit of shorter arms. But regardless, I think Will Campbell's the best offensive lineman in this draft, and the Patriots need offensive line help. So we're going to draft Will Campbell to probably play right tackle. Moving on to the Denver Broncos here at number 3. I think it's important to get them weapons as well. Bo Nix has struggled a lot, but does he have the best offense surrounding him? Probably not. Courtland Sutton's a solid piece, but besides that, who do you get excited about there? I like Marvin Mims, I like Troy Franklin, but are they solid number 2 options? Probably not. So we're going to look to go receiver here, and Luther Burden finally had a good game this season, because his first 2 weeks he was very quiet, but he had a breakout game. And I think it's between Luther Burden and Tetairoa McMillan and Travis Hunter, depending on if you think he's a receiver or a cornerback. I'm going to go with Luther Burden here, getting that more explosive weapon alongside Courtland Sutton, because Courtland Sutton's kind of that bigger receiver, similar to a Tetairoa McMillan. So we're going to get a more explosive target in Luther Burden here at number 3. Moving on to number 4, we got the Tennessee Titans, and I'm probably going to look to get an addition on that defensive line. The interior of that defensive line with Sweat and Simmons is a really good duo, but out there on the edge, they don't really have anyone that excites me. And someone that really excites me, and I think who could be a really, really good pass rusher in this league, is a Nick Scourton or Nick Scorton. I think it's Nick Scourton, but I hear a lot of people say Scorton. But we're going to choose him here with the 4th overall pick for the Titans. Moving on to number 5, we got my favorite team, the New York Giants, and I'm pretty sure a lot of Giants fans watching this are going to want me to go quarterback here. If we look, who do we have here? We have a Carson Beck, a Shedeur Sanders, a Connor Wigman, a Quinn Ewers. Those are enticing, but I do think that there's going to be better choices in the 2nd round, or even you can trade up back into the 1st round way later in the draft. I think the only 2 quarterbacks that might not be there in the 2nd round is Carson Beck and Shedeur Sanders. And I wouldn't be mad at getting a Quinn Ewers, either late in the first round by trading back in, or, just have him falling. Or Cam Ward. Both those guys are, really talented. They're more toolsy guys as opposed to Shedeur Sanders and Carson Beck, who are more of a, anticipation, accuracy, mental type of quarterback. So we're actually going to pass on quarterback. Giants fans, don't get mad at me. And we're going to go with Will Johnson. That Giants secondary is, not great. It's got potential now that we've seen Deontay Banks and Drew Phillips has been playing really good in the slot. But getting that second outside corner along with that defensive line and Bobby Okereke in the middle, I think that's a top 5 defense on paper. So we're going to go with Will Johnson there. And then, we're not doing a second round here or trades, but just hypothetically, we would probably go quarterback with the second pick and hopefully get a Cam Ward or a Quinn Ewers. Moving on to number 6, we got the Washington Commanders. And this is a very popular pick, but I think Travis Hunter could be an interesting pick here. And we would draft him to be playing, they need receiver and they need cornerback. But I think Travis Hunter is a little too small. If I was Washington, I would want a bigger cornerback than a Travis Hunter. You already got Emmanuel Forbes, who might be the starter next year. He hasn't looked great since coming to Washington. But I think you draft Travis Hunter just based off the talent alone. Once you get him into the building, you can decide if you want him to play cornerback or receiver. He'd probably want to play receiver, and pairing him up with Scary Terry with Jaden Daniels throwing them the ball, I think that's a very enticing pick there. Moving on to number 7, we got the Arizona Cardinals, and I think this has to be a defensive pick. You could go, BPA on the defensive side of the ball, and that could be a Malachi Starks, that could be a Benjamin Morrison, that could be a Kenneth Grant, a Michael Williams. I think that secondary is lacking a lot. And with that being said, I think Benjamin Morrison is a top 5 talent in this draft. So we're going to go with Benjamin Morrison to Arizona. Moving on to number 8, we got the Minnesota Vikings, who probably would have really liked Benjamin Morrison, at Travis Hunter, or Will Johnson. All 3 of those cornerbacks go off the board before the Vikings can pick. But when you think about it, Harrison Smith is up there in age, and getting a guy like Malachi Starks to replace him in that Brian Flores defense, that sounds like an amazing pick. And then hopefully you can get a cornerback in round 2. Moving on to number 9, we got the Las Vegas Raiders. And I think this is where a quarterback will probably go off the board. Gardner Minshew played well in week 2. He won the game against the Ravens, but is he the quarterback of the future? Probably not. And I think out of these, top quarterbacks, it's between Shedeur Sanders and Carson Beck. I go Shedeur Sanders to the Raiders a lot. He seems like a Las Vegas Raider, but we're going to switch it up and go with Carson Beck. Although he didn't have the best game last week, we're still going to choose him. I think he's probably the best quarterback and with the highest floor in this draft. Moving on to number 10, we got the Seattle Seahawks. And I think that right side of the offensive line needs some help. Charles Cross was a home run of a pick, but over on the other side, Abraham Lucas just can't seem to stay healthy. So we're going to go with Kelvin Banks, and we'll try to move him to right tackle to play that right tackle position. Moving on here to number 11, we got the New Orleans Saints. And like I said, I don't think the Saints will be picking here at 11, but that's what PFF has them as. And I also don't think they need a quarterback right now with how Derek Carr has been playing. So we're going to get who I think is the best fit out of this entire draft, and that's Tetairoa McMillan. Rashid Shaheed looks like the next coming of Deshaun Jackson. Chris Olave is just that separator who can, just pick up first downs with ease and, create separation. And then Tetairoa McMillan will be that big body red zone target. I think that's just a perfect wide receiver core for Derek Carr to throw to. Moving on to 12 here, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I think that they need to get some pass rush help. And there's still quite a bit of pass rush talent on the board with guys like Michael Williams, Abdul Carter, James Pierce, Princely Umamulin. I think James Pierce, although he's, been off to a slow start this season for Tennessee, I just think he has way too many tools and way too many athletic traits not to go, early in the draft. Guys like Abdul Carter are also very toolsy, Michael Williams as well, but I think James Pierce has the highest upside out of those 3 guys. Moving on here to 13, we got the Indianapolis Colts, and an intriguing pick would be Colston Loveland, getting Anthony Richardson yet another weapon, but that Colts secondary is on the verge of being extinct at this point. With Juju Brents out for the season, they really have nobody. And we know the Colts love their height, weight, speed freaks, and we got two of them here in Tacario Davis and Siobhan Revell. I think Siobhan is probably the better fit for Indianapolis. I think he's a little bit more athletic with the same type of size. I think he's 6'3", 6'3", 193. Tacario is what, 6'4", I believe? Yeah, 6'4", 190. I think Siobhan is a little bit more Indianapolis Colts type. He's just a little bit more athletic with that size and length. Moving on to 14, we got the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think it's either cornerback or it is receiver. And seeing Isaiah Bond here, I think he's worth a top 15 selection. But the fit is a little iffy in my opinion. George Pickens, that big alpha receiver. But you got Roman Wilson, who hasn't, I don't even think he's played yet. I think he's still dealing with an injury. But Isaiah Bonds, I'm pretty sure below 6 foot. Yeah, 5'11", 180. Is he going to be able to survive on the outside? Or is Roman Wilson going to be able to survive on the outside? One of those guys are going to have to be on the outside. And I don't know. I don't know if either one of them would, thrive in that spot. But Isaiah Bond's just way too talented of a receiver to pass up on. You could also go with Alec Ayumanor. But taking him with the 14th pick is a little rich in my opinion. So we're going to go with Isaiah Bond and trust that he can play on the outside. Moving on to 15, we got the LA Rams, and I think it's got to be offensive line here. That offensive line is completely decimated with injuries early on in the season. That whole offense in general is. And you could look to get the Matt Stafford replacement in a Shedeur Sanders, Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milroe, Cam Ward, but I think we're going to look to improve that offensive line, and we are going to go with Ariante Urzuri out of Minnesota. Moving on to 16, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars, and with Tyson Campbell on IR, he's really the only cornerback they have. You could also try your luck on an athletic, toolsy Georgia edge rusher and a Michael Williams. I think they learned their lesson on that though. So we are going to go with Tacario Davis, the really lengthy, athletic, somewhat athletic cornerback, athletic for his size. Moving on to 17 here, we got the Cleveland Browns picking. And I think this is where we could go with a Michael Williams or an Abdul Carter. Zadarius Smith is up there in age. He's not going to be there forever. And you want to keep some type of pass rush talent alongside Myles Garrett, so that way Myles Garrett's not getting all the attention on the opposing offensive lines. So we are going to look to go with Abdul Carter is, an athletic freak who, might be a linebacker, might be an edge rusher. I think he's an edge rusher, but we'll see. I think Michael Williams is a bit more safe of a pick. Moving on to 18, we got the Chicago Bears. And I don't think this is much of a decision here. I think we're going to go with Emory Jones Jr. Whether he's a tackle, whether he's an interior guy, I would probably just stick him right at the, right guard, left guard area. We've seen that the Chicago Bears offensive line got absolutely embarrassed with the against the Texans. So you gotta keep your prized possession and Caleb Williams protected, and I think Emory Jones would do just that. Moving on to 19 here, we got the Chargers, and I'm gonna go with a fun pick here. We obviously know the Chargers are a run-first team, but Jim Harbaugh also really likes his tight ends. Colston Loveland is a Michigan guy. He was coached by Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. I think this is just a cool little storyline, and I also think it's very realistic that the Chargers go with tight end here. Moving on to 20, we got the Houston Texans. And what do the Texans even really need? You could go interior offensive line, or you could maybe even go interior defensive line. I think those are the only two really places you could go. I mean, they're really just set all around that roster. But Deone Walker is very intriguing. He's been off to a pretty slow start there in Kentucky, but when you look at him, he's 6'6", 345. You would think, oh, he's a run stuffer. No. He's got some pass rush juice, and he's actually really athletic for his size. And, getting to some more pass rush with Will Anderson on the edge alongside with Danielle Hunter, I think Deone Walker could be a really fun pick there. He maybe isn't the biggest need, but he's a fun pick. And it's early on in the season. We're just experimenting right now. Moving on to the New York Jets. We don't really know how long Aaron Rodgers is planning on playing. And with that being said, we could look to go quarterback. Now, if he doesn't retire after the season, is Aaron Rodgers going to love the Jets taking a quarterback here? Probably not. But I think it would just be the smartest option to go quarterback, just to, because the Jets are a weird team where they're not very set up for the future, and getting a quarterback would be a good start. Now, sure, there's Sanders in that QB room with Aaron Rodgers. Probably isn't the best decision, but I've already clicked the button. It's happening. I think that would be a very interesting quarterback room. Moving on to 22, we got the Atlanta Falcons, and we're going to go pass rush here. Besides Grady Jarrett, they had Matthew Judon, but who else do they have? Matthew Judon's no spring chicken either, so getting a young pass rusher, since Arnold Ebiketie hasn't really shown much, I think that's a really good idea. And like I was talking about earlier, Abdul Carter's an athletic freak with a high upside in pass rushing, so we're going to go with Abdul Carter. Moving on here to 23, we got the Miami Dolphins. And they're in a weird spot too. It seems like every year they could go offensive line, and then they choose not to in the first round. So we're going to stay true to that and not go offensive line, just because I really don't think it's realistic. I don't think they value offensive linemen just because they get the ball off so quickly that they don't really need to protect for that long. So we're going to go with, we'll probably get more defensive line help. A guy like Kenneth Grant, who is a big guy, but also really athletic at 6'3", 339. I think, the Dolphins love their speed all over that roster, and I think Kenneth Grant is the epitome of speed for a defensive tackle. Moving on to 24, we got the Green Bay Packers, and I think we go secondary here. A guy like Kevin Winston could be interesting, but they already got Xavier McKinney. I think cornerback's the more realistic option here, and we could go with the Jahdae Barron, who's been off to a pretty good start. Denzel Burke, though, I think is just a more polished cornerback right now. The Packers just need help alongside Jair Alexander, and I think a guy like Denzel Burke could provide very good value. Moving on to 25, we got the Dallas Cowboys, and when your running back room is Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott in 2024, that's not very good. Enrico Dowdle, I don't think he's going to stop you from going running back here. And I think it's between Quinshon Judkins and Ashton Jeanty. I'm a bigger Ashton Jeanty guy, but Quinshon Judkins just seems like a cowboy. Maybe it's because he plays at Ohio State, but he's just more that big bruising type of running back opposed to an Ashton Jeanty. So we're going to go with Quinshon Judkins here at 25. Moving on to 26, we got the Philadelphia Eagles, and for the most part, they like to go offensive line or defensive line. But I think a really interesting pick here could be a Harold Perkins. If he was bigger, he would be an edge rusher. But at 6'1", 225, he's just not big enough to play along that edge. But he's a really good blitzing linebacker, and he's also really good in coverage. Devin White's on a one-year deal. So is Zach Bond. And then Nakobe Dean. I mean, he's not going to stop you from going linebacker. So I just think it'll be a really good fit to have Harold Perkins be up that middle. And then you could also experiment with blitzing him off the edge as well. I just think he's a very versatile player for that Vic Fangio defense. Moving on to 27, we got the Detroit Lions. And I like going with this pick a lot, and that's Alec Ayumanor. You got Amon-Ra St. Brown in the slot, Jamison Williams being that deep threat, and then having Alec Ayumanor being that, intermediate, deep, big body threat at 6'2", 210. I just think that's a really good fit there in Detroit. Moving on to 28, we got the Cincinnati Bengals. And we've seen so far, again, the Bengals offense hasn't been at full power. T. Higgins hasn't played. Jamar Chase is, it's a little bit weird there. But we've seen that the Bengals offense isn't the same without a solid rushing attack. Zach Moss isn't, the type of player that Joe Mixon was for the Bengals. But I think getting Ashton Jeanty there in that offense would open up the pass game a lot for Joe Burrow and the Bengals. So we're going to go with Ashton Jeanty there to Cincinnati at 28. Moving on to 29, we got the Buffalo Bills. And I think we could go secondary here. They're a bit thin in the secondary, especially at cornerback. And I really want to fit Jahdae Barron into the first round. And I think this is where we're going to do it. I'm a big fan of Jahdae Barron. You know, he might not be the biggest guy in the world, but he's feisty and he's just a fun player to watch. So we're going to go with Jahdae Barron there at 29. Moving on to 30, we got the Baltimore Ravens. And I've been saying a lot in my videos that Ravens offensive line, more specifically the right side, is very concerning to me. And I'm scared that they're not going to be able to hold up in pass protection for Lamar Jackson. And with that being said, we're going to find a new right tackle. Roger Rosengarten, obviously the, developmental guy that might take over for right tackle. But I think you get more of a solidified option there. And I'm not the biggest Blake Miller guy. I think Jonah Savania. I say Jonah Savania. I've heard it's Jonah Savania. Either way, I think he's more of a guard than he is a tackle. So we're going to go with Josh Simmons there at 30. Moving on to 31, we got the San Francisco 49ers. And speaking of Jonah Savania, I think he's a better option here for the 49ers. I think he could, slide in, maybe replace an Aaron Banks, or just play somewhere along the interior of the offensive line. I think that's a really good pick there for the 49ers. And then rounding off this mock draft, we got the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think they could go a couple of different ways here. Receiver, you could go Emeka Egbuka. Hollywood Brown might not even play a snap for the Chiefs because he is on a one-year deal and he might be out for the season. Could go, not offensive tackle, you could go interior offensive lineman, go with a Tyler Booker, just because, Trey Smith is going to be a lot of money and he's up for an extension. Are they going to be able to afford him? Maybe, maybe not. But ultimately, we're going to go with an edge rusher here. Felix Anudike-Uzomah is a young player, but he hasn't cracked the rotation, at least, the starting rotation yet. But a guy like Princey Umamulan, I think he could be a really good fit for the Chiefs, playing alongside George Karlaftis. So we're going to go with Princey Umamulan there at 32. And then that's going to be the draft. Let me know what you guys think of it. Again, it's very early on in the season. A lot's going to change. But let me know if, a certain team should have won a different player down in the comments. And if you like the video, consider subscribing and hit that like button. As always, I'm the Draft Nerd. Thanks for watching.